Welcome to the continuation of the 1987 AmiExpo, New York City. This is tape number 23-377-7. The topic is C and Assembly Programming. The moderator is Eric Lavitsky. Thank you.
Here, let me introduce myself. My name is Eric Lavitsky. I've been involved with the Amiga for some time now, since June, July '85 or so. Had quite a fun time doing it.
Paging.
Okay, they're paging? Thank you. And I'm currently, always have been, the head of the Jersey Amiga Users Group. Oh, here he is. Everybody, a round of applause. We'll let Charlie get seated first. So please let him through. Please let him through. You'll have to come around this way.
No.
Come around this way. Okay. Now we're ready. Okay. That's okay. Where was I? Yes, I'm currently a consultant for ASDG Incorporated. Many of you may have seen me at the booth. I'm very happy to be here, and I'd like to introduce you to the members of our panel discussion this afternoon. First, let me mention one thing in regards to the point somebody made before about talking about the various compilers. We're not here to extol the virtues of one compiler over another. I will succinctly and abruptly put an end to any discussion of that nature.
Why?
It's not appropriate for the table here. We're not here to compare the two directly. Obviously, we have some biased members on the panel. We'd prefer not to. You're free to, during the show or afterwards, come up to them and talk individually, but we're here to talk about more general issues. First, I'd like to welcome, who is unfortunately not mentioned in the booklet that everybody has, I think, John Toebes from Lattice Incorporated. Everybody, a hand. I guess. To my right is Jim Goodnow from Manx. And to my left is Charlie Heath from Microsmiths Incorporated. We'd like to give each panel member a few minutes first to say a few things about what it is they represent and some of their views, and then we're going to go ahead and get into more specific topics, and then we'll try and handle as many questions as we can from people before people start collapsing in the back. So why don't we start with John? Go ahead, John.
Some of you may recognize me from various programs you run, Hack, Pop CLI, and a number of other things that have been produced by the software distillery. So a lot of things I'm going to be bringing here today are related to problems that I've run into porting Unix programs. Hack, for example, came originally from a Unix system. It's a very large program. And other types of those programs that I've ported to the Amiga and things that I've learned in the process. I'm also a fairly experienced assembly language programmer. Charlie can attest to a little bit of the code that I've written or has waded through. And I should be able to answer some questions on that.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, I've been with Manx since its beginning, pretty much, and so we have a lot of experience, putting compilers on lots of systems. So, in terms of porting between 8086 machines and 68000 machines and 6502 machines and 8080 machines, I have a lot of experience in that area. A lot of which involves going in and sort of disassembling the ROM system and finding out how the system really works to make it do what things it really should be doing. I guess that's pretty much it.
Well, I've done several programs, FastFont, TextEd, and Mean18, and lately ARP, which is to replace these for CLI commands. I've done a lot of assembly and C interfacing together, and I'll be doing a lot more of that with the library binding routine. So that's basically what I'll be talking about, is interfacing C to assembler today.
Okay. Since we have a list of topics that people would like to talk about, I think, Charlie, you missed some of that, but some of it. Oh, I'm sorry. I think what we'll do here is we'll have everybody pick one of the things that people mentioned at the beginning and say a few things about it. We'll go down the line and then we'll take a few questions. So let's start again with John.
Okay. I think I'm going to take the question about the raw keyboard, because that's going to relate to supporting programs. One of the things, most common question you hear from people is they take their typical program from K&R and they type it in and it has this get C in there and they complain it doesn't work, it's broke. Well, there's a reason for that, and it's not that the compiler or any of the languages are broke, it's that you have to be aware of the way that the Amiga does I/O, and we have at least 3 major ways that you can do I/O coming into a program. You can do standard I/O or Unix I/O, where you're reading straight from a file. You have where you can go through Intuition and have Intuition bring all your I/O to you, and then you can go one level below and go to console.device or get your I/O from a device. And of course, you can go and program on the bare metal and read straight from the hardware, but we're going to ignore that. The highest level and the easiest level probably to program in, but the one that gives you the least flexibility, is indeed the Unix file I/O. That's where you use open, read, write, get char. It's very nice in that it's a stream of consciousness. You always get one character at a time. However, based on the device that you're dealing with, that I/O is going to come in various chunks. If you're reading from a disk, for example, it's going to be coming in 488 bytes at a time. It's going to be doled out to you a little bit at a time. If you're reading from the console, if you're reading from a concolon window, which is what you're running in a CLI, it's going to be buffered up until the user presses return, so that gives them a chance to do editing on it. And if you're writing to something like the early RAM disk and you're writing a byte at a time, it's actually writing out at a byte at a time, and it's a real performance penalty at that point in time. So at that point, at that level, you don't have any idea of what you're connected to on the other end, and you really have this little filter that's giving you things a bit at a time. The next level up, which is what I have chosen when I do all the ports of the programs, is I actually use Intuition and let Intuition give me my I/O. When you open up a window, you can attach the IDCMP, where you can set the IDCMP flag so that it gives you either vanilla keys or raw keys. With vanilla keys, it basically gives you almost everything that you got when you were reading from the file for standard I/O. With raw keys, you actually get the actual keyboard patterns on there. Now, I would caution you with raw keys not to actually go to that level, because you do run into the problem with the multinational keyboards. There is a routine, though, called raw key convert, which will convert those key codes into the appropriate characters. So look up raw key convert and use the raw key, either use the raw keys or vanilla keys from the Intuition window. The last level is console.device, and that is where you can open up a window, and then you can use that window and pass it in a open packet when you open a console.device for that window, and you have a little bit more control over than with the using the Intuition vanilla keys and raw keys. You have a little bit more control in that you can do asynchronous I/O, and you can send additional messages. All of this is documented in the ROM kernel manual. If you look up under console.device, but the basic concept behind it is you do an open of a window and you pass that information when you do an open of console.device. But my recommendation, or my feelings of where I've done all my porting, has been done at the intermediate level of using the Intuition windows. And as you can see with Hack and some of the other things that we've done, it comes out quite well. You get a very reasonable interface, and you can expect to do graphics in that type of area. And just one last comment about that intermediate one is it also makes it easier to synchronize getting things like menu events and getting mouse events. It all comes through one port when you're using the Intuition form.
Okay.
You mentioned sending the packet, raw packet.
Packets,
that's true. That's important. If you're using a concolon window and you're reading from the original file using the Unix I/O, or you're actually reading from a concolon device, there is a packet under 1.2 to switch it to raw mode, and you can send you can send a packet to the console.device to the console device to tell it to switch into raw mode, in which case it wouldn't buffer the characters. It does have the side effect that means your program has to handle any command line editing the user's going to have to be doing, but it does give you the characters immediately as they're typed.
Okay. I think that it's a very important thing to talk about, because most people's first project on the Amiga is to take something they're familiar with and then come over to the Amiga environment and try to do that again. And definitely those issues, you have to really look at it and see how to do it. Does anybody want to say a few words about about manuals and things like that now, or should we just go on and?
Sure. Okay. As far as like.
Hold on a second. Yes. Can we hold questions till after everybody's had something to say?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. As regards manuals and as far as like learning C and learning C on the Amiga, there are a lot of different C programming books available now. C has become pretty much the language for programming microcomputers, both in the PC world and in the 68,000 computer worlds on the Macintosh, the Atari, and the Amiga. So there are a lot of books out there just in general on learning to program C. Some of them start at the level of just primers, okay, where, like C primer, which, talks to very low level. Some books are geared more towards people who have some programming background. Other books are geared toward particular programming backgrounds. There are some books which talk about going from BASIC to C. Some books for going from Pascal to C. As far as particular recommendations, the book I like is Programming in C by Kochan, Kochan, as far as a general introduction to C. Beyond having an introductory book, it's always good to have a reference. For a long time, the standard was pretty much the Kernahan and Ritchie C programming language, although I think that's pretty much been replaced by Harbison and Steele's latest ANSI updated version as a reference.
Harbison and Steele.
Second edition, yeah.
Harbison and Steele.
And that really provides the full reference as to the language.
It's called a C reference manual.
Right. As far as programming the Amiga in particular, there are a number of books available. Rob Peck, who did a lot of the original ROM kernel, the original Amiga manuals for Commodore, has his own book, which is considered by a lot of people to be very good. It's not perfect. There are problems in it. Excuse me?
By whom and
Rob Peck, P-E-C-K.
It's a Programmer's Guide to the Amiga.
Yeah, is that Programmer's Guide?
Yeah.
Programmer's Guide to the Amiga. There's also a very good reference by Mortimer, which is a 2-volume set. The first volume dealing with most of the Amiga functions, the second volume dealing with devices, I/O.
I have some advice on that set. Volume 2, page 18 is blank in a great many of the printed copies, so you can get through.
So look for that first before buying. Okay. Thank you.
But it basically provides a lot of information that's in the Amiga manuals, but with a little more description. Okay, whereas the Amiga manuals tend to be somewhat terse, describing the functions.
Okay.
This is by Mortimer.
Eugene P. Mortimer is the author, and it's I believe this one is a guide to programming the Amiga. Is that the name of it? Whereas Peck's book is a programmer's guide to the Amiga, I believe this is the Amiga Programmer's Handbook. That's correct.
Handbook, that's right. Yeah.
And is that
Volume 1 and Volume 2.
is that published by? That's published by Cybex.
Yes.
Yes, Volume 2 is
Yeah.
out. It's published by Cybex. If nobody heard me in the back there.
A lot of Volume 2 copies are defective, though.
Was that originally one volume?
Yes, it was originally one. It's been
No,
switched-
no.
no.
Volume
No,
2 is a
no.
is a whole new book.
Yeah.
Okay,
There are 2 editions of volume.
there are
Yes.
2 editions of Volume 1.
First edition was a single one, then when they went to the second edition, they made
No, no, no. Volume 2 has information that is not in Volume 1. There are 2 editions of Volume 1. The second edition of Volume 1 was updated for 1.2 and has 1.2 specific.
Okay.
I didn't notice much differences between Edition 1 and Edition 2. Did anybody?
major differences is just the 1.3
Functions,
yeah.
Otherwise, it's essentially the same book.
Somebody should mention the autodocs too.
And I guess finally, as a obviously the final sort of semi-definitive source is the ROM kernel manual, the Addison Wesley version being more up to date than the versions from Commodore. There's also available from Commodore through the developer program developer disk, which contain on the disk autodocs, which are the documentation for all the functions kept up to date by Commodore.
How do you get those?
Okay, I believe it's either $20 or $25, and you send it to either 20 or 25. I'm not positive.
Oh, it's 20. I ordered it.
Okay, it's 20. Okay, you send in the money to Commodore Amiga Technical Support, or CATS for short, C-A-T-S. Mention that it's for the native developer update, and that address is 1200 Wilson Drive, Westchester, Pennsylvania. I can't remember the zip code.
It's on your Amiga.
19380.
19380, thank you. And they'll send you a disc with the printed 3 discs with the printed information. Is that correct?
Send it to anyone?
4 discs.
Anyone?
Yes, you don't have to be a developer to get these. You can just send in the $20.
What are you asking for? For native?
That's the native developer update.
What? Since the 1.3 gamma release?
Some things have changed since the
Yes.
1.2 gamma release, so you probably want to get the latest.
Can you do the address again?
Yes, 1200 Wilson Drive, Westchester, Pennsylvania, 19380.
It's on your Amiga. It's on your boxes.
It's on. It should be on your boxes and documentation. Yeah.
Oh, Harbison and Steele. Publisher.
Is it Prentice Hall?
Prentice Hall. I think it's.
Oh,
I think it's Prentice Hall.
One more question.
Are there any good books on algorithms for graphics and
It's Artwick, Bruce Artwick. Well, it's not necessarily C, but
Well, I mean, if you want about graphics programming in general, there are a number of the classic reference books that people would use, like Newman and Sproul, Principles of Interactive Computer Graphics, Foley and Van Dam. Those are the major ones that you would use when you were going through college to study graphics programming. As far as it applies directly to the Amiga and C, I can't pick one out specifically. But I would know that.
There is a book on.
There's 2 books out. One's called Inside the Amiga Graphics, and the second one is C and especially graphics for the Amiga and the Atari ST. Both are put out by Compute. The second book is goes from somewhat of an introductory level to a more advanced in terms of polygons and so forth. And that second book, the C and graphics, has a disc, corresponding disc as well.
the title of the second book is actually called Learning to See.
Let me see. Okay, I can't say how good they are, but they are available apparently.
I'm looking for a more advanced technique.
I can't pick one out.
Yeah, you'd really have to look for general.
I guess the standards committee, I believe, called Learning to See.
Join your local SIGGRAPH. That would probably be a good way to start. Join the ACD, the Association for Computing Machinery, the Special Interest Group for Graphics. Excuse me. They have meetings. You'll probably be able to find a good list of reference materials that way for graphics. That's the best advice that I can give you on that. Okay. You want to start saying that?
Okay, I want to go on when do you pick between C and assembler? Well, I guess there are 2 or 3 different reasons why you might want to think about the possibility. The one that's obvious is for performance or size of code. And I won't really talk about those because you just have to pick. I mean, it depends on what kind of product you want to put out. If you want to have something that's small and efficient, then you might switch to assembler, or you might combine assembler and C. Okay. But the other times when you would want to use assembler are when you have to interface with something that has assembler, like registers are set to certain things, and this is when you have to do it. Like if you're interfacing with the library, you need a way to pass parameters between assembly routines that expect things in a particular register and the C routines which get them off the stack, except with the new Lattice prototypes, which allows some of that to be done. But even so, there are times when you have to have registers set up, or when you have to have particular values, or when you have to know exactly when something happens. Like when you're writing to registers that are hardware. With C, you're not quite sure exactly when things happen. When you say store something in a register, it doesn't necessarily happen in one instruction. So those are the main times. On the Amiga, the interfacing, the register passing, basically all the ROM kernel calls, all the calls in the Amiga libraries are passed in registers, and so you need binding routines that basically switch to the registers from the stack, and then switch back, save the stack off and things like that. So that's the basic time. So I guess if there were any particular questions, we could maybe address those later.
Okay. I think when you approach programming on the Amiga, it's very different from many other machines that people are used to, because you're really dealing with 2 different environments that were somehow married into one common environment, so to speak. And I think we might want to talk more specifically about some of those issues, dealing with BCPL, dealing with data structures in Amiga DOS as opposed to data structures in the exec, and what considerations you do have to think about. Who would like to start on that? Anything in particular? Jim? Okay. Jim
Yeah.
will start.
Amiga-DOS, as you probably know, came in sort of late into the Amiga, and there was originally an operating system spec'd out for the Amiga, which was to run on top of, I should be careful, I use my terms, there was a file system and process manager that was designed by Amiga to run on top of exec, which is really the multitasking kernel. The spec was on paper and was supposed to be done by another company. That didn't happen, and so since the people who did the Tripod's operating system had gotten their operating system up very quickly, and Commodore and Amiga were sort of wanting to get the machine out, they decided to go with the Tripod's operating system. Now, Tripod's was written in BCPL in England, and so there really wasn't time to sort of convert it to C and work within that environment. The people who knew Tripod's were used to working with BCPL. They wanted to work with BCPL. And so the environment that they created was a BCPL one married to the C and assembly language environment on the Amiga. Now, the effect of this primarily is that when dealing with certain DOS functions, primarily when you're dealing with the directories and files, you end up with something called a B pointer, which is essentially a pointer that's been shifted by 2. And the reason this was done was that essentially all words in BCPL are long words, so they occupy 4 bytes. And so if you're bumping a pointer, if you can just bump it by 1, by adding 1, and you're now pointing at the next long word, and because you then unshift it to actually get the pointer. Doesn't sound very efficient, but the environment they were designing it for sort of made it practical. The result of this is that if you want to use something returned from DOS, which is a B pointer, you can't use it directly. You have to, in fact, shift it and then use the pointer that you get as a result of shifting it, multiplying it by 4, essentially. In essence, for the most part, this isn't a problem for most people, because you usually don't have to actually go into a file handle or into a lock and actually access the variables within it. So the whole thing with B pointers and BCPL, for most people, is a non-issue. If you make the Amiga-DOS calls and you use the things you return in other Amiga-DOS calls, it's all copacetic, there's no problem. It's only if you want to get into a lower level of the DOS itself that you have a problem, and you have to be careful when you're dealing with pointers and when you're dealing with B pointers.
There's one thing about that that catches a lot of people the first time, and that's when someone tries to deal with a file info block. And then because of the way B pointers work, they have to be on a 4-byte boundary.
That's right.
If you don't do that, you go to the problem.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Again, it's the kind of thing where if you want to, if you actually go to the level where you're actually getting a file info block for a particular file or directory, and you want to look at the information in it, that file info block has to be actually brought into memory on a long word boundary, because the address you pass in to get the information, is going to be shifted, by Amiga-DOS and treated as a B pointer internally, and so it's got to be on even boundary, otherwise it'll be off by 2.
If you were to use LFMan, then you don't have to be concerned about it.
That's right.
Because LFMan
That's right.
is an
Actually, any allocation scheme, any memory allocation scheme will return you, right? Yeah, will return you something on a 4-byte boundary. So if you use malloc also within either of the C compilers, you will also get something on a 4-byte boundary.
Just don't declare it as a local variable, which
On the
is a
stack.
mistake.
That's right. If you declare it as a local variable on the stack,
Or
and
an
you've got a short or an external, you've got like some characters or a short on the stack, then it won't necessarily be on the long word boundary.
Charlie has something.
Yeah, some stuff that we've been working on, the art project, we built a library that has some interface routines that sort of try to deal with the BCPL environment. The things like this, the devices list that has all the devices and assigned directories and volumes. And it has B pointers everywhere, and you have to shift them about 5 different pointers to get to them. So we added some functions that basically you call them and it sets up a list that all looks like C data structures. It's all with direct pointers. So basically it'll go and grab everything for you, and so you sort of don't have to deal with the B pointers. And there are a few other functions like converting C and B strings to back and forth. So you might consider using those to when you have to deal with a VCPL, it sort of gives you a layer between you and it.
It's nice to have tools to deal with some of the shortcomings, and I think that's the real thing to say. If you can find a tool that helps you get around a real problem, by all means use it, buy it, support it, and it's a good thing.
Yeah. But don't be scared away by it, because again, unless you're doing something like wanting to get at a lower level, you most of the time don't have to deal with it, and it's not a problem.
Okay. Great. John, is there something next topic?
I guess we could talk about C versus Module 2.
Do you want to address that issue? No, that doesn't.
Let's talk about
debugging
I didn't
techniques?
write that down.
Debugging techniques. Actually, both Jim and I.
Okay, or did you want to take a look at
All right.
analyzing errors?
Yeah. Oh,
Diagnosing.
good one. That's
Good
next.
one. Okay.
Diagnosing errors. This is the nice thing. You run your program, and it comes back, and there are a couple different situations that come up. The most common one is you get this nice little red line on the top of the screen that says program completion code 00003 dot something. What that, well, for people that aren't aware of what that is, it's called the Guru meditation number, and the way to determine what it is it's two parts. The first part is the diagnostic code that indicates what went wrong. If the number is a 3, and I always get 3 and 4. 3 is addressing exception. 4 is an invalid instruction. Baker, 0000B, is a, I think it's a line 11 emulator. Basically, it's an invalid instruction. If you get a 4 or if you get a Baker, it means your program's basically gone into Never Never Land. If you get a 3, it means that you try to address something that is on a byte boundary with a word pointer. So you had something you declared as a pointer to an int, and you tried to access it. A common thing that will happen with this is actually if you have a B pointer, that you try and use a B pointer as a pointer. B pointers, for some unfortunate reason, tend to often be odd. And when you end up using it, you're going to get an addressing exception.
It's going to be odd half the time.
Yeah, it's going to be odd half.
They're actually going to be odd more than half the time, because they always have 4 bytes preceding the stuff that's before it. They have the link that's stored negative offset from the B pointer for all the data structures. So in fact, they're going to be odd most of the time.
Yeah,
it's going to be half the time. It's going to be half the time.
No, it depends on how the allocation scheme works,
Right,
because it's a buddy system. Remember on the
That's buddy
they tend to be odd, and that's a very common cause.
Yeah, small size of data.
That says it.
What?
Non-existent memory address?
Yes, non-existent. Some.
That's 2.
Yeah,
2.
but I don't think you're going to see them. You only see that on 020.
Yeah, you rarely see a bus error. I doubt your application ever has.
What is the error? I believe I don't know the number, but it's the description of it in the manual is free twice.
Oh, okay. Also, let me get to the other part. If it's not one of those numbers, if it's a low number where, in the range of 0 to 27, it basically corresponds directly to the 68,000 interrupt vector. And if you have a good 68,000 book, you can look up and figure out what it is. But you're only going to really see the 3, the 4, a 5 sometimes, a divide by 0, and the Baker you'll see. Then the other times, you're going to see the number, and it's going to be a much larger number. It's going to be, for example, I'll give it 87000004. That's something that people that have been dealing with Amiga DOS will see very often. The way you interpret the number is the first high order bit, the 8 part of it, says that it is a non-recoverable alert. It means your machine's crashing.
It warns you first.
Okay. The first, then the 7 indicates that it's part of the DOS vector, and there's a file. And if you're going to see a lot of alerts, print out a copy of exec/alerts.h. Has everything in there. Tells you how to diagnose all these errors.
And that's in the include directory, by the way, for anybody who didn't catch that.
Or in assembler, it's alerts.i. I recommend having a copy of that handy if you're going to run into them. A common one you'll see. Let's see. 89 is the memory.
81009 is free twice.
Free twice. I mean, there's several of them you're going to start running into. But basically, you can break it down. The first part is the subsystem, and the second part is of the number. So 870005. Okay, the 8 says non-recoverable, 7 is the subsystem, and the 5 says which error number for that subsystem it is. Now, what's on the other part of the dot, is typically an address that's associated with the error. Now, the address has one of three forms that are seen. One is the address is actually the address of the task that went south, and typically you'll see it's whatever your user task. Other times, with some of the memory errors, it's actually the address of the memory block that's corrupted. And then other times, it's the ASCII text HELP, which means that it had no idea exactly who it went out with, so, it just went away.
But it'll put that up if it goes and tries to figure out certain things, and there's information, and there are things are just corrupted so badly that you can't even find exec base and things. It'll give you that guru.
Well, I think the question you want to know is what can you do at that point in time? I mean, there's the intuitive, I know what caused that because I know the last thing my program did. However, there's a lot of times that's going to fail. With some programs that get so large that it becomes impossible to really do that type of debugging. There is a thing called ROM whack built into the ROMs. If at the point when you see that light flashing, the power light, how it flickers before it puts up the guru, if you have a terminal attached to your Amiga at 9600 baud on the serial port, when it's flickering, you press the delete key, it will put you into ROM whack, and it's a very primitive debugger, but at least you have a chance at the machine level to look at what's going wrong and poke around in the machine before it would go. Also,
one note about that: make sure you connect the terminal up with a null modem, which reverses lines 2 and 3, flips them. That's an important one to know.
And there's documentation on ROM whack in the ROM kernel manual. It tells you all the commands. You can also use the question mark key. I think will give you a little help.
How about grand whack? Where do you find instructions for that?
Well, Commodore is actually working on finally releasing the software toolkit disk along with documentation for it. I've seen documentation for it a long, long time ago, but the real documentation for grand whack, the one that's extensible and everything, will be coming out. It's not really readily available right now.
They released at least two
Grand whack is not
versions.
Grand whack is not on the ROM, by the way. It's a separate program. You load up and it installs itself in the debug vector, and you can.
Yes.
Right.
Plus, by the time the light's blinking, it's too late to install whack.
Usually. Yeah.
What are the other parameters for the terminal besides 9600?
9600. I think it ignores about everything.
Standard 2, 3, and 7 lines 2, 3, and 7 are probably all you need to have hooked up, and make sure 2 and 3 are flipped.
7 or 8?
I think I've tried it with 7 and 8. I mean, I don't think I've ever had a problem.
I think they say it's 8-bit parity, but I'll probably matter.
It's probably, if anything, it's 8 bits, but they ignore the higher order bits, so it's really effectively 7 bits. I have not run into a problem with the terminal. What I do, if I know that I want a terminal, I always echo greater than a serial port with it set up at 9600 baud just to make sure it's working. If that works, then you know you're not going to have a problem. I was going to say one other thing is there are debuggers, one of them Metascope, which works on almost anything that you're working with, which will catch the error, attempt to catch the error. There's also a program out called Gomph.
Get out of my face.
I mean, there's a number of utilities out that will attempt to catch the error, but they're not going to clean up for you. All at this point in time, you know you've gone south. You just want to stop and figure out where you are.
Right, but even so, it's better to still let it do what it wants to do and still reboot your machine.
Right, you really do.
You do.
No matter how much somebody tells you, there's no way you can clean up the machine to the from several areas and be sure that your machine is going to be stable. And
right. Okay, somebody did ask specifically about what free twice meant, and I think I'll just mention that. That means that somebody attempted, there was a piece of memory that was already on the free available memory list of the system, and somebody attempted to free it again. And the system says that's no good, and gives up on you. Okay?
Basically it's saying that there's something wrong in your program, because if they allocated the memory between the time you freed it and you freed it again, okay, then you'd be freeing somebody else's memory. And so...
Is it conceivable that would be happening during a linking process? You get that error during
as in a linker created that error and nothing else was running?
Running A-Link?
Running A-Link?
A-Link.
Well, that's easy. Yeah, we can bash A-Link. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Glad we can say things about, huh? It's conceivable. It is.
It's conceivable anything can happen when you're running any program.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't.
Right. People try to make their stuff as bulletproof as possible, but sometimes things get through.
Yeah, even Cornell, right, protects disks.
Okay. Anyway, let's go on to the next topic.
Are you going to discuss other debuggers that are available?
Just about other tools. No. How about
Windows and things like that? I know. For example, I know that the WAC that was distributed on the developer's disk has sensitivity to symbols, and yet it seems that most compilers available don't dump those symbols to the object files. Now,
Which compilers don't?
Yeah.
You mean like Modula
I
and?
have a Lattice compiler that doesn't do it, but I have a very early one.
Well, it's really the linker. So
Yeah.
it's the linker that'll do that. And
Okay, so you're saying if I call my linker correctly, the symbols are getting.
I think A-Link strips some symbols with some funny stuff.
but A-Link will put them in if you want it to.
Sure.
I've never successfully been able to get that to work. Yeah, neither have I.
There's a standard. There's a defined standard in the executable file for putting symbols in there. And
Ask Andy Finkel or Carolyn Scheffner downstairs can probably tell you.
But they're not symbols that WAC finds.
Really? Wow.
They're here too.
No experience with that.
B-Link does, and the Manx linker does. So, if you really have to use A-Link, but
okay.
Yeah. Huh.
Well, it's possible
Well,
WAC's not adhering to
I would assume A-Link does because it was used for a long time by the people at Amiga to do the development, and so
Are you talking about Grand WAC, the big WAC?
yeah.
developer WAC.
Yeah. Okay. Now, which one? Are you talking about WAC on the 1.2 gamma disk? I believe they stripped out a lot from that. A lot of the macros that were supposed to be in that were not shipped with the product before they sent it out to the developers. So a lot of stuff may not work with that.
Symbol should work though.
I don't know. I guess so.
Yeah, it should work.
Try it with the older version if you can get hold of it. Maybe. One more question, then we'll move on to the next topic.
This is just a comment that I picked up from a C book somewhere, and that is when you're declaring local variables, if you start with your largest variable size, that is longs, and then gradually work down to your smallest, that is chars, then you tend to avoid alignment problems because they will tend to stack themselves in alignment order, and then you tend to avoid the problem of address error.
Yeah, that's worse than assembler. The C compilers all automatically adjust the offsets, but you'll lose a few bytes.
Yes.
Yeah, the C compilers do.
Yeah,
It's required by the language to make sure they're adjusted.
Things would die real fast.
You would want, in general, when coding in C, you probably want to put. You probably don't want to rely on the order of your variables at all. Any compiler is free to reorganize anything it wants about them. So there's not really any.
Yeah. In terms of general efficiency, if you have character type things, if you put them together, compilers will probably not force each character into a separate word. Okay, it'll like coalesce. Chars, so we'll save some stack space if you have a lot of character variables and arrays and things.
Okay. Now we're going to say a few things about environment. People ask what tricks we use in our development environment, what maybe little tools or things we use, and
the first thing, basically what I need most is speed. When I'm working, the faster it can go, the better, because then you can go through many cycles. So you want to figure out how you want to set things up to go fastest, and you definitely want to get a meg or more of RAM, and so 2 megs is better, and 4 megs is even better still. And you set up as much as you can in RAM disks.
Beyond 4 megs, though, there's not much gain. I mean, there's a noticeable.
It depends on what you're using for tools, but usually 2 megs is enough for most, because then you can copy your compilers into the RAM disk. You can copy your include files, and you might want to figure out what include files you need to use, and especially like if you can pre-compile includes, figure out just exactly what you need so you don't have to use as much RAM. But get as much as you can into RAM disks, and I've even switched to doing my sources in RAM disks and just making sure I back up onto my hard disk is less reliable than my RAM disk. so I trust my RAM disk more. So and then I just back up onto floppies.
Yeah, I think you can really save a lot if you're working on an application over a long period of time, and pre-compiling include files is a really good trick to speed the compiling process up. It really is, and you should use it if you can. Question?
When I'm debugging though, and I run the program and it crashes the system, I then have to reload RAM
Okay, well, I was going to say, one of the things that's very key to what Charlie's talking about is getting a recoverable RAM disk, and I'll put a plug in for ASDG.
There's two of them at least. I mean, there's also
several, VD. There are a few available. Only one is shareware, and that's ours.
Which are they?
There's a shareware one from ASDG called the ASDG Recoverable RAM Disk. It's like $10 still, shareware.
Whatever you'd like, yeah. It's on Fish Disk 58.
Yes, that's what I use. It acts as a track disk device, so basically everything that DOS expects to happen happens. It's been very, very reliable.
RAM calling can be very unreliable, by the way. If you do a lot of development with the normal Amiga RAM handler, and you're building large files in the RAM disk and the machine crashes with who knows, a free twice or whatever, it's very likely the RAM disk that did it. Yes. So try and stay away from the default Amiga RAM handler. That will probably change, of course, as next release the operating system comes.
Although in terms of the RAM handler, even though I have the ASDG recoverable RAM disk, okay, it is slower than RAM colon. So all my temporary files go into RAM colon, which has the advantage that if I have to reboot, they're all erased automatically.
Right. That's there's one that Neil. There are other commercial products that are available. One that Neil Caton wrote called VDK, which some memory board manufacturers, I believe, market with their product. I can't think of any names off the top of my head. And
Expansion Technologies.
Expansion Technologies.
One that I just gotten. It's not publicly available yet, but I don't know if it's going to be. But it's basically it's a RAM disk that looks exactly like a floppy, and you can do a disk copy from it to a floppy, and it runs twice as fast. You have to set it. I don't know if it's going to be made available.
Yeah.
But if you can get it,
it's part of somebody's product.
They come with Microbotics.
Right, that's the Microbotics one.
Okay. I didn't know if you don't expect that.
There's somebody else.
One of them is hardware-based.
That's a little different.
But there's another company who has memory expansion and has a RAM disk that I remember who it was. Someone else was telling me that does the same thing. It does a disk copy, but it wasn't Microbotics.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But those are it's a lot better than backing up single files, because if you do like 3 or 4 single files, it takes longer than a disk copy.
But if you already have memory, I don't know if these companies will sell the RAM disks to you individually. You'd have to call them and ask them. In the meantime, you can go to Fish Disk 58 if you like and use that one.
Commercial.
Here's a commercial, please. Contribute. But anyway, yes.
Why is the expansion memory always used as RAM disk? Why don't you just use it as memory?
Okay, let's talk about, briefly, I don't want to get too much into it, but a recoverable RAM disk means that when the machine warm reboots, not when you turn it off and on, but when it gurus or when you hit the control, Amiga, the three-fingered salute as we call it, happens, when the machine comes back up, there is a way to recover all the data that was in the RAM disk. Okay. If you have, sometimes some people write the ones that will work only with chip RAM, but you're talking about you're only going to be able to make use of a very small amount of space if you only have chip RAM. Fast RAM will also speed up things because remember, fast RAM does not incur any contention from the custom chip bus. Excuse me. Yes. So that all accesses from the 68000, which is really all you're doing when you're compiling programs, to the external memory is much faster than when you're dealing with internal memory. So that is good for your development environment in general.
I think the question is just
one
of the things you use.
Why use it as a disk instead of as a memory?
Well, if you have 2 megabytes, you have to have a lot of programs running at the same time in that memory to really use up 2 megabytes of memory. Okay, because most programs might use between 64K and 128K, and so programs that would use all the 2 megs, you have to have a lot of programs running at the same time to fill up that 2 megs. So it's much more useful to use as a RAM disk, which is much faster than even hard disks or floppy disks. So it speeds up the entire process.
Right. We talk about latency for accessing a device. With a hard disk, there is some. With a RAM disk, there's virtually none. It's memory. It operates as fast as the machine can go. Yes.
In terms of a recoverable RAM disk, I heard somebody tell me that a good idea is to, like, for your DOS commands, for example, is to arc them, and then to de-arc, copy that arc file over and de-arc them. What do you think about that?
Well, with a recoverable RAM disk, your startup time when you turn on the machine is, it's questionable. If you have a recoverable RAM disk, how long it takes to copy them in the first time. is sort of moot because every other time after that it's going to be no time.
So that
especially we leave our machines on like for months at a time.
Right.
Plus, you have a multitasking machine. There's nothing that says that startup process can't be a run, of a copy of the things out there. You got a multitasking machine, let it do it, and slowly your machine gets faster as more things get into RAM.
Okay, I'd like to move away from the hardware aspect a bit, but let's say one more thing about hardware, since some of you may go on and work on large projects. If you are working on a large project over the course of a couple days, a week, 2, whatever, you may want to think about leaving your machine on, because actually it can be a consideration that it is more harmful to the machine to constantly turn it off and on every time you go away for 2 hours to get a cup of coffee and come back and work on your machine than it is to leave it on 24 hours a day.
Yeah,
but I'd like to leave
the surge to the hardware is more harmful than leaving it on.
Right. So, but I'd like to leave the hardware issues at that, and let's get on with more real hardcore software topics. Do we have any questions that are not related to hardware?
You can turn the monitor off.
What was that?
Question about RD.
Go ahead.
About how often does a RAM disk take a hit from a crashing program?
It depends on the program. If a program goes astray and just starts writing over random addresses, which can happen, it's got the RAM disk, as they say, loses its cookies.
Yeah, it depends because again, if you've got a lot of memory, it has to sort of it more likely it'll hit something important and cause a guru before it gets to the memory that's actually the RAM disk.
Right. But if you're working on something that's really crucial, it's always a good idea to back it up every couple times you recompile and you're about to run it. Back it up first. Wait till the disk light goes out, then run it.
Yes.
It's really important to you.
Or else the other thing to do is to actually run it on a different machine.
Yeah, that's another.
That's another thing a lot of people do. A lot of developers who have 1000s bought 500s just so they pop the disk out, pop it in there, and see what happens.
Do the recoverable RAM disks have the ability to detect the fact they've been corrupted?
Yes, they do. And when they come back up, if they're corrupted, they have to start from scratch. There's no way to recover.
Well, I understand that, but I'd rather it restart.
Yes. Oh, yes, it will.
Yes. Oh, I can't tell there's any crap out here. I'll just start executing.
But it'll do that even as it's running. In other words, if you've accidentally written into it, okay, but not gurued, most, at least the ones I know, okay, will also detect that.
Right.
So that
it'll say it has a rewrite error or whatever. Okay. Why don't we get on to, so you guys want to talk about other tools? Not other tools, I mean machine configurations, as in 010, 020, 881.
Memory.
And expansion memory issues?
Sure.
Okay, we're going to talk a bit...
Just one quick question.
Yes.
The RAM drive. What about disk caching?
This is it.
Oh, disk caching.
Why don't you go down to the ASTG booth after tomorrow, or give us a call? But
again, anything that speeds up the process. I mean, disk caching.
If you have memory, if you have lots of memory, you can spare a little bit towards a disk cache or a recoverable RAM disk. Do it. It's a good thing for a development environment. It'll make things much more bearable. That's the best advice.
There are other things. There's one other thing that you can do, which I maybe shouldn't talk about because I'm premature. But at one point there was for the developers there was a sort of pre-release of a shell or a CLI which made certain programs resident. Okay. Now there were restrictions on making them resident. What that meant was that the program gets loaded into memory, sort of actually loaded as though it's going to run, and then every time you go to invoke the program, it actually shares that code that's already up in memory and loaded. So the time to run the program is just like no time at all, and it doesn't take up multiple copies of the program. Only take up what data areas each program needs. The code for the program is there only once. So if you want to run multiple versions of your editor, it doesn't take up as much memory as saying, loading each one from RAM disk and having in RAM disk as well. Now there's a problem with the way the Amiga is set up in terms of creating programs that can be made resident. Okay? And that the only ones that could be made resident really were BCPL programs. Okay? Module 2 can also?
No.
They have no data area?
They have to be reentrant.
They have to be reentrant, so it just initializes the variables runtime rather than...
No. See, the problem is that when Amiga DOS loads a program, it has a segment list, and the segment list is linked as part of the process. So what happens is that in order to have the segment list be shared between two programs, at some point the pointer has to point to two data hunks.
If you can run two copies of it, but for example, if you load the modules.
Oh yes, you make it resident. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Resident.
That's possible. Yeah. Okay.
I think the real thing to say is that if you could find a tool and you can spare a little resource for it, but it gives you a great return, then by all means use it. I mean, whether it's a shell whether it's a RAM disk or a cache, whatever it is.
Conman.
Or something like Conman, and, different kinds of shells, replacements for the console handler, all tools like that. The best thing to do is just build up the environment the way you want it. Everybody's environment is personal, and but there are basic things you can start off with.
The thing about the resident thing was that there will be a public domain way of doing resident programs in general. To get help. That's all I can say right now, but it will be public. But it will be public domain within a few weeks. What?
You want to mention something about it?
Let's talk after.
Okay.
Why don't we cover 010, 81 issues and stuff? You want to say anything about that?
Sure. Yeah, one of the other ways of speeding up development, obviously, is to buy a CSA Turbo Amiga.
It can be part of your environment if you.
And I mean, for some people, it may be very cost effective. I mean, if you can get someone, to say that it's worth X amount to have this thing done by so and so, maybe you can get them to spring for one. It's not unfeasible. I mean, and it has a significant impact in terms of turnaround and compile time.
I've been done some work with just their add-on boards, just a board just stick a board in a 500 or 1000, and that's still, even without the cache memory, it still increases throughput tremendously on most applications.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that's not too expensive.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of dealing with the 68020 as a development environment, there are some things you have to be careful of. Okay, one thing in particular is that the 68020 does not give you errors if you address odd memory as data. Okay, so you can have bugs in your program that you don't know about until you go run on 68000, and all of a sudden you start getting all these address errors because you're addressing things on odd boundaries that worked on the 68020. So it's always good whenever you deal with different environments, the 010 or the 881, to test your programs in the different environments so that you can be sure that you haven't let something slip through.
That deals with also video as well. We should mention that if you're dealing with you want it to run on all Amigas, try and see if it'll run on or be sure when you code it that it'll run on a PAL machine as well as an NTSC machine. NTSC is the American standard for video, PAL is the European standard for video. That's another issue I just thought I'd throw in.
Don't require interlace if it's possible. Some people ship out programs that require interlace, and you may be aware. I mean,
yeah. And particularly with PAL, you have to be careful because it uses more memory. So if you have a program that's like using 511K on the PAL machine, it won't work.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's another issue in general, is in terms of when you produce programs, making them so that they will run on different machines. Okay, there are differences between the different Amigas, the 500, the 1000, and the 2000. Okay, some of these differences are very subtle. As far as from a software standpoint, I know of no real differences. Okay,
so long as you don't talk directly to the hardware, you're pretty safe.
That's right.
If you talk directly to the hardware, there's some things like the keyboard interfaces. The timing is slightly different, and if your loop was too fast on the 1000, it won't work on the 500 and the 2000.
Right. If you're going to be getting very fancy like that, try and learn how to deal with the resources, and try and allocate the resources for yourself. The resources for the joystick ports. If you're going to be diddling with fancy hardware on those ports, learn how to use those first before going directly to the hardware, and that way you'll be sure of being upwardly compatible.
But as an example of something where there is a difference that where the hardware affects the software, there has been a problem with the Commodore disk controller in the 2000, where if you have like a really super high-res screen or something like that, it sometimes has some DMA problems. Well, it turns out what the problem is, at least, is a timing problem. When they run in the C1000 memory, which is a little bit slow, they have the problem. If they force the stuff to load into the fast RAM, there's no longer the timing problem. Okay, so if you have something that's very timing critical, and you're assuming it's always going to be running a fast RAM, well, the Amiga 500 fast RAM isn't the same as Amiga 1000 fast RAM. So if you're working in borderline areas, you really want to make sure that you try things in different environments so that you don't have problems. Some of the games that were done for the 1000, when they put them on Amiga 500, all of a sudden looked slow because maybe they were just borderline, just making it on the 1000. All of a sudden they run on the 500, and all of a sudden they start missing, things.
Is that for me?
on different configurations, it's nice to try out as much as you can, particularly something that's a real problem is low memory. What do you do as you start running out of memory? Or in the middle of your program running, if you're really working with the multitasking, somebody cranks up another program and it sucks out all the memory, and all of a sudden, here's this program expecting to get some memory and there's none there. So you really need to make sure that you check all the requests that you make of the system. Make sure that when you ask to open a library or when you ask to allocate memory that you actually get it back, particularly opening libraries. I've seen a number of programs, number of speech programs that go to open translator.device or narrator.device and it's not there. And then they go to call it and it goes... So it's a real important thing to be aware that when you ask for a resource on the machine, make sure you can get to the resource, and that does affect your configurations.
Speaking of low memory, since John mentioned low memory, I'll talk about another kind of low memory and put in a plug, and that is that...
when moderator,
we can't do this, but it's okay. We're all friendly here. We'll put in a plug for MemWatch, which it comes from the distillery.
That's true.
Which is that kind of plug is okay. Which will let you see when your program is running whether or not you're bashing on low memory locations, and it's a very handy tool when you've got a program you don't know what's going on, why it's crashing. You run it and you can see if you're writing over important system memory locations in the first page. Is the first page?
Yeah, location 0.
I have actually had MemWatch catch a step on location 4.
Oh my gosh, exactly.
Before it got accessed.
What is MemWatch and where do you get it?
John, you want to say something
about
it? Go ahead.
MemWatch is a program I wrote from an idea that EA made. EA, in their development, they have a piece of hardware that sits there and watches the first 100 bytes of memory just to make sure you don't step on it. What MemWatch is a software version of this program. It's available on BICS. It's available on a number of BBSs. One I know that it's available on. It's free. Is the Deep Thought BBS, the software distillery. I'll give you the number 919-471-6436.
Is that on the fish disk?
It's also on a fish disk, I believe. It's available in a number of places. Basically, all it is when MemWatch is running, it sets itself at a very high priority. I think it sets itself at 20, so it tries to run as often as possible, and then it goes and examines the first 100 hex bytes of memory, and if ever any of those change, which they shouldn't, then it immediately puts up an alert that says somebody stomped on the location, tells you what location got stomped on and what it was stomped on with. It gives you a chance to just go ahead and let it go on. And it's a very nice tool. You should, whenever you have a product that goes out or any program that you're doing, it should run cleanly with MemWatch. It should never trigger MemWatch.
Does he give that number again?
Area code 919-471-6436.
About low mem too.
What, low mem server? Oh. Well, here's another.
SPD, right?
That's PD. Anybody can use it.
Okay.
Also, another back to the first low memory issue. Here's another tool that's available on a fish disk, and it's from ASDG, and that is the low memory server. And that is a library that you can open up with your application and register with to be notified of low memory conditions, so that if somebody tries to allocate a large chunk of memory, and it turns out that there's not enough, before that allocation fails, your other application can be notified that somebody tried to allocate a lot of memory and it's going to fail. And if you want to, you can try and free up enough memory for it to use. And that's a very handy tool. It's somewhere above disk 60. I'm not sure which disk it's on, but
I think
it's another handy tool.
What a lot of these questions and should be showing is it is very handy to have a nice, good collection of things that are available out there. I have found I have all the Fred Fish disks sitting in a box next to my machine, and there are so many things you can pull off of the Fred Fish disk or pull off the BBS. I mean, you can go broke, by the way, dialing into BBS just for Ma Bell. But it really is, if you're going to do extensive development, it doesn't hurt to have a nice database of programs or examples that you can go to and look at and pull these things off. And Fred Fish is probably one of the best collections of programs that you could have.
And go to your local groups. Definitely support your local user group. And you can not only get resources like that, but human resources like the people on this panel who can answer your questions about programming on the Amiga 2. I think that is one of the best Amiga resources around. Definitely.
Well, actually, resources is a good topic. I mean, that was asked about.
Oh, what resources?
Well, things like
Where you
there
go to
are
help?
other resources where you can go for help. Bix has a very knowledgeable group, both on the Amiga and on the C language in general. Okay, there's a C language conference on Bix as well, where a lot of people, there's a section where you can just go in and say, well, I have this problem, I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z, and people who respond tend to be experts.
Yeah.
Bix has a very, very high signal-to-noise ratio, in that most of the people tend to simply just read Bix, okay, and every once in a while put a question up. So the people who tend to post a lot tend to be experts, and so most of what you see is just very, very, very high in information content. Other resources?
And we'll get our kickback from Byte next week. No, really, that's just a
but
joke.
in terms of my dealings with like other networks and things, it just,
Yeah, networks and local people, definitely.
Yeah.
My question we're talking about allocating resources. I've looked through the ROM kernel manual on that subject. I find not enough even makes sense out of it.
All right.
Where do you find information on how to correctly allocate resources?
Okay, we can go back to what we were just talking about, and I believe Phil Lindsay published an example that's now on one of the fish disks on how to go about correctly allocating the resources for the Potco device. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
There's track disk is a device you can get by resources.
Track disk is not does not have a resource associated with
devices,
it. No.
you can open the device, and the handler that handles the open can allow or disallow opening it.
There are certain specific pieces of hardware that have a resource associated with them. The different CIA chips, Potco. CIA chips are the chips that control things like the serial device, the serial port rather than parallel port. What other resources are there?
I think that's most of the
That's
stuff.
most of the major. There's MIS.resource. I forget what's in there.
Well, in general, most of the things you're going to go through with the libraries and devices that you're going to be opening, they're going to be handling the tracking for you. Unless you're really getting down low level, you probably aren't going to have to deal with the resources.
If you have a piece of hardware that you're designing that you're going to be writing software for, then you may get to that level. Yeah.
What's that example?
Okay, Phil Lindsay published an example on one of the fish disks. You're going to have to look for it in an index or a listing of the fish disks, but it is described as an example of using resources. I believe the back of Amazing Computing, which many of you may have, has lists of what's available on some of the recent fish disks.
But you don't know of a good technical source described?
He may. I don't know what he may have a little tutorial of some kind associated with the program. So you might want to check there first.
One of the things, a lot of the stuff on the Fred Fish is not just junk put on there. It tends to be very well commented. It's sort of a chance, and I encourage you, as you do things and find out tricks with the Amiga, to submit them to Fred for available for everybody else. As people have found out tricks, they go through and they write these little programs and examples and comment it out and show how things work.
Don't assume that everything is given from God, though. Not everything on them is perfect or correct. But there are many, and you look for some of the more recognizable names. And sources from Commodore usually post things that are correct. So that is a good place to look. Okay. There were one question.
I just wondered about the signals on the expansion disk. There's some of them that aren't like
The expansion disk or the expansion connector.
Expansion bus, whatever.
Yes.
It's not S100.
It's not, but I don't really think we should be covering that here. Okay. Some people had some questions about issues in dealing with various macro assemblers, what features you should look for, and what features you should maybe use and know about. And Charlie, want to say a few words on that?
I'll talk about the assemblers that I know about. The Metaconco assembler sort of set the standard because it was the first one, and it was the system assembler. It's very slow, and it's well, it works, but there are a lot of limitations. But it sort of set the standard for the syntax of what is expected. Yeah.
When you say it's slow, you mean the assembly is slow or the execution?
Yeah, the assembly is slow. Well, the execution is basically that depends on your code. Basically, your code gets assembled to pretty much the same thing.
We all write fast code.
So the Metaconco assembler doesn't optimize. It doesn't.
Oh well, true. Some of the assemblers will optimize. Like move that are small values will optimize to move quick, or it'll optimize branches. Like particularly Jim's does very good at those.
But Metaconco doesn't.
And Metaconco definitely doesn't.
You have to be explicit with Metaconco if you want the short form of something.
But so the Metacompo sort of set the standard for the syntax that's accepted. But there's several other assemblers that are much better. The one that I use most now is ASM68K, which is a public domain assembler, and it's very nice because it allows you to use references that are like Goodnow's assembler does, to use the base register. The base register lets you use 16-bit addressing, which basically means instead of using 32 bits for every address reference to data, you use only 16 bits of reference. It's faster instructions and smaller code. So I really like ASM68K. It's about twice as fast as the original SM. And it's compatible with B-Link, and so if you're using Lattice and B-Link, then that's a good assembler to use. And also Lattice is working on theirs. Jim's assembler is also very good. If you're using Manx, is a very good assembler. It's very fast and it does good optimization.
Is SM68K public domain?
Yeah.
On the fish disk.
Do you know who wrote it?
That's by Wes Howe. Is that right?
Wesley Howe.
Wesley Howe.
And it's freely redistributable. It's a very good assembly.
And he's continuing to improve that, right?
Yes. Yeah, he has been. He's done a lot of work. He did a lot of things that I asked for just to get the relative addressing. I've been asking somebody for years.
Good talks.
Yeah.
When you use an assembler, you have to have the include disks, the libraries, and everything. Where
Yeah,
do you get those?
they're different assemblers. Well, Commodore, if you're a developer, I don't know, is that in the developer?
Yes, you can get that. You can get that even by not being a developer. Again, the same address that we mentioned before for Commodore.
Cats
The native developer update includes the include files for 1.2.
So all I need would be that, and then one of these other assemblers.
Right. If you wanted to deal specifically with assembly language and you don't want to lay out a lot of money, you could go buy for $20, get the native developer update, and pay for your local user group for a fish disk. That's right. You need that B-Link as well to be able to link the object file that the assembler produces in order to create, a final runnable program. The native developer updates also provide you with, Amiga.lib, all the necessary libraries that you need to link in with.
And A-Link is on there as well.
Oh, A-Link is on there as well. Then in that case, you don't need B-Link, but you would probably prefer to use B-Link.
Yeah.
It's much faster than A-Link.
So.
Yes, an earlier version of B-Link is on the fish disk. Newer versions, I believe, are now owned by Lattice. And
B-Link 6.7 and previous is freely redistributable.
I think it's on Amicus 12.
Also on an Amicus disk too. Amicus is another source of public domain software that you should look at. You can take a look at both listings in the back of Amazing Computing.
Let me mention one other assembler that's very good, but has some limitations. It's GenAm, which is the commercial one from Great Britain. Its big advantage is it's very, very fast. It's sort of memory resident. It has a built-in editor. And if you're doing strictly assembly development and you don't need a lot of frills, the macros are a little bit limited. It doesn't do some things that the other assemblers do. But it is lightning fast. So if you're doing pure assembly development, you might consider that one.
Somebody else?
GenAm from a company Highsoft.
GenAm Highsoft, yeah.
GenAM.
Are there any compatibility problems using the .oc, the include files with any of the assemblers other than the Metacom?
Some of the original.
There's one. Well, yeah, but that's not true anymore. But the only assembler I know of that has a real problem, has any problem, is Howe's assembler. There are 3 statements in the include files that get his assembler fits because he is less restrictive about spacing.
Oh, right.
But you can go in with an editor and change that.
Basically, if you use the stripped files, basically the ones without comments.
And he documents this exactly what you have to do. It's very. You'll be surprised the documentation with ASM68K. It's been better than some commercial products I've seen.
Okay.
Any good questions?
Yeah. Excuse me. I think we've covered a lot about the initial things that people mentioned here. The only thing I can see left is, C versus Modula 2. I don't know if anybody on the panel wants to say anything about that, but usually often the choice of a language is a religious issue. It's depending. It can be simply what you prefer.
I was going to say
the kind of structure that you like in a program and the restrictions or freedom that it gives you. When dealing with programming in Amiga, obviously most of the examples you find around are going to be in C, so it's the obvious place to start. If you have experience with Pascal-like, Algol-like languages like Pascal or Modula 2, it may be pertinent for you to go out and investigate that path, but it's really up to you. I can't tell you to go one way or the other.
How about DCPL?
How about it? I don't even know if you can get one.
Here, probably the BCPL environment won't be supported anymore.
Yes, right. They're really porting everything over either directly to assembly language or C for the future, so that they can do all the development internally and have it go lightning fast and cleanly.
Plus, you don't want to program in BCP.
You don't want to.
Plus, yeah.
It's okay. Why don't we? We have a few minutes, and why don't we just take a few random questions from the audience, and then we'll finish up here first.
I don't have a 2000 yet, but I was wondering which works better, C on the IBM side or the Amiga side?
It depends. Well, C on the IBM side is obviously only going to let you run applications for the IBM side. Okay. Unless you buy a cross compiler. Is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about getting a cross development environment that runs on the PC, and then is that what you're talking about?
68,000 at 8 megahertz is probably faster than 86
at 4 megahertz. Certainly, the Amiga the compiler on the Amiga should certainly run faster. Yeah. And on the Amiga side, you'll be able to take advantage of all these nice tools that we were talking about, like recoverable RAM disks and caches and shells.
Lots of memory.
And lots of memory. 8 megabytes. It's going to be difficult to get that on the PC side, I'm sure.
Although you can have RAM disks that are from the Amiga on the PC side.
Right, but I think native is the way to go.
Yeah.
I would definitely say that. Over here. Yeah.
Any recommendations on shells?
Shells. There are a couple of public domain ones. The one that Matt Dillon and then Steve Drew later on enhanced, which went from 2.01 all the way up to now it's 2.07M is the latest one. Those are available on the fish disks and public domain.
Which one is that?
That's written by Matt Dillon, MattDillon, and Steve Drew, Drew. Drew. It's called Shell. Dillon's Shell or just Shell. That's the best.
It's like a Unix.
It's like a C shell, yeah. And it has some good constructs for dealing with files and directories and past arguments and things like that.
And then Conman.
Oh, Conman is Bill Hawes.
Bill Hawes. Right. Conman is not a shell. It is a hooks into your concolon windows, so that once you run Conman, every concolon window that you open up or that any program you might use opens up will always have command line editing and command line history. Basically, cursor up gives you a previous command, cursor down gives you next command, cursor left and right works, overstrike. It's freely redistributable. It's available on bulletin boards and on the fish disk, and I think it's on fish disk. No, he didn't put any restrictions.
Is version 1.0 out?
1.0.
1.0 is available, yeah. Other than that, there are a few commercial products available. Metacomco offers one. I don't know how good it is. Can anybody here say anything about it? And I believe some other companies are coming out with some too, commercially. But look at the fish disks first. It's a good place to start, always. Yeah?
What's the status of the Amiga DOS replacement program?
We've got version 1.0 is out. Basically, we've done 29 commands out of about 37 or so.
What was the question?
Okay.
Amiga DOS ARP, Amiga DOS replacement program, which is just a group of developers got together and decided they wanted to get rid of BCPL. And so we basically started that by getting rid of the commands in the C directory, which all are in BCPL, and create the need for a BCPL environment. So basically we've done 29 sort of identical replacements of the commands that were in BCPL. We're going to have a talk tomorrow afternoon on DOS, and I'll be talking on that, so maybe I should talk more then.
Yeah, okay. Is there a question in the back? Yeah.
Tasks and processes, the difference between them, and what do you need to look
Okay.
Okay. Basically, if you're going to be communicating with Amiga DOS, you're going to be communicating to the file system or to any of the handlers, then you need to be running as a process. Other than that, you can run as a task. In general, you're going to find that creating a process is there's not much extra overhead in creating a process. The system doesn't have much extra resources it needs, just a little bit more memory and one more message port that's linked into the system. So in general, you'll find that a process is sufficient.
You don't have to worry about whether you can call certain things.
Right. Did you hear that? No. They said then if you create as a process, from the start, you won't worry about whether or not you're going to be calling Amiga DOS functions like open and close, things like that.
Can you do anything about turning a task into a process?
Not once the task has been allocated. There's a memory block that has to be contiguous. That is the task block. So it would be very hard.
Unless Andy can tell us differently.
Okay, I see a question back here.
What's GNU?
GNU?
Yeah.
GNU stands for GNU is not Unix. It is a project headed by a gentleman named Richard M. Stallman from MIT and an organization called the Free Software Foundation. What would you like to know about it in regards to the Amiga, though?
I've seen it here and there.
GNU Emacs.
Micro GNU Emacs is no longer called Micro GNU Emacs because it is really not an official project of the Free Software Foundation, and Richard Stallman asked that it not be called GNU anymore. Really, the only GNU project that's really been seriously ported to the Amiga is Bison, which is I believe, YAC replacement.
It's a generic YAC.
It's a generic YAC, which stands for Yet Another Compiler.
It's a parser generator.
Which is a parser.
Generic YAC.
Generic YAC. A generic YAC. It's a Bison. Hey, that's right. There you go. Very good. But that's available on one of the fish disks too, by the way. Again, another plug for Fred. He's a great guy. We love him, and does a great service to the Amiga community. We should all support him. Definitely. My user group, we send him money and get his disks all the time. Yeah.
What is the compatibility between program written for Unix and for the Amiga? Is there a lot of work to convert the program to Unix?
It depends at what level, but I guess we're not.
Okay, I'll give you a good example. I took Hack. If you've seen Hack on Unix, Hack is a very character-oriented game that uses the terminal and expects to have character graphics on the terminal. Importing it to the Amiga, I had it up and running on the Amiga in about 2 weeks, and most of that was actually fighting other things. But in order to put the interface on top of it, most Unix programs are going to use a curses type interface. You can get something like that up and running using, emulating curses and write that on there. But you're going to find that doesn't look good for in the long run. As a good example, there's a text version of Hack that I put out, and I don't think anybody plays anymore. And then I spent some time to do some very simple graphics for the characters. So you can there's some nice subtle things that you can do on top of the characters and deal with even though it's still a character-oriented thing, I've put graphics on top of that. So what you're going to want to do is, yes, you can port the thing to the Amiga, but no, you're not going to want to sit like it was ported from Unix in the short term, and in the long run anyway. So there's the short term.
Quickly port it over.
Yeah, and you're going to want to basically move as much toward using the Amiga for its I/O. As I pointed out earlier about you can use the Unix I/O in order to read and write characters, but if you start moving towards Windows and talking to the devices to get your I/O, I think you'll find out things work a lot better in the long run.
Okay. One other problem you'll have is BSD directory structures.
Well, if you're porting system-specific applications like things that open up dev-kmem that look at kernel memory on a Unix machine directly, you're obviously going to have a hard time also porting any real system functions. Generic applications like databases and such can usually be ported over without too much work. Okay.
In regard to the console, if you have an existing application which does a lot of I/O through standard in and standard out, is there a simple way to open a CON:, and then attach your standard in and standard out to that so you don't have to...
Yeah. Actually, the simplest way that I would recommend, and it makes it easiest in the long run, is to go in your include file and pound define printf and whatever the other function is using for the standard to call your own routine. Let's just call it myprintf. That way there, and then write your own version of myprintf that filters everything through it. There's two reasons for this. One is you don't have to deal with the Unix I/O. It makes it a lot smaller, and you have better control over it. And the second is it gives you a chance to filter all your I/O through a single point. You'll find that if you can put all your I/O and all your interaction with the user in one place, and you can handle all the particular events. This may sound like Macintosh program, which is very event-driven, but you'll find that there's something nice about that concept. You can handle all the particular events at one place.
That can be put on directly programming the Amiga too. Many people have the case where their application opens up, many windows, and they want to receive messages, IDCMP, intuition messages through only one message port. Well, there are ways to share one common message port between multiple windows, and that can be a big win too. So that's a general thing.
Can I just follow up a little bit? I managed to figure out one way to do it, and I wonder if this is a dangerous way to do it. I would close standard out and then reopen it as my window, and then I would attach the file pointer from standard in assign that to the file pointer and standard out. It seems to work. I don't know exactly why it works, but it works with the Lattice anyway.
I think it doesn't work in Manx.
No, it doesn't work.
Well, I mean, just as a comment, in general, when you're dealing with Unix I/O, the layer that's underneath what you call is really private to the library support function of the compiler itself. And there are defined, everybody will, the vendor will provide defined interfaces for manipulating those. But anytime you go in and change anything out from underneath it, it's likely to break. Particularly with Unix I/O, you have some required buffering that might exist there, and if he's got some stuff buffered up and you change things out from underneath them, it could cause problems.
Let me follow up on this. It happened with me in making a process. So let me just ask, in each case, suppose I'm making another process and now I wish to print F or something, but two different windows. The new process can open its new window. So I started from one CLI. The program begins a new process that's now going to communicate. And I wanted first to communicate to the old CLI and then to the new window that was open.
Okay, now when you open the window, are you opening a con colon?
Yes.
Window, okay.
And in Lattice I found that I could do, as I said, repoint the standard in and standard out. I must have done something wrong in Manx, and maybe you can get from an expert how to get that process.
Actually, this question has come up a number of times, and in fact, what we're doing is we're implementing there's a routine which takes a file descriptor and allows you to open that. It's called FD open, and it gives you back a stream. Okay, so if you close standard in, and if you did an FD open on say 0, 1, or 2, whatever the file descriptor was, you would get back a stream. Okay, so what you need is something that goes from like the low level, okay, like raw I/O, like if you open a window and as doing a capital open at the DOS level. Okay, we have a new routine called dopen, removing the F, in which takes a raw and an open mode and gives you a file descriptor, and then if you use that in FD open, you get a file, a real stream. Okay, but it sounds like what you want to do is really just do an F open of double quote con colon type thing, but you want to assign standard in and standard out to it. Is that right? Oh, well, that's, yeah, that's okay. I have to look at that.
Let's say a couple more questions, and then I think we should finish up, and everybody can just meet everybody informally afterwards. Yeah. No? Oh, any other one over here? Yeah.
Source generators.
Source generators.
Oh,
I mean program
Charles,
generators.
do you use any of those, Charles? Do you use any Power Windows or anything?
Oh, as in tools like Power Windows?
Yeah.
Or what was it? The gadget editor that everybody's working on for a while.
I've only used Power Windows once, but what little I've used of it, it's actually quite good. I know that John Meissen has used it quite extensively for a project he's doing. The nice thing about Power Windows is that you don't have to spend the time figuring out the corners of where this gadget is, and allows you to prototype very well. I'm pretty sure that I'm trying to think. All of a sudden, people who do Aegis, they've advertised that they use Power Windows for all of their products. So the nice thing that you get with Power Windows is the quick chance to prototype what your thing is going to look like. As a side comment for people, if you don't want to go out and get Power Windows, something that I do personally is I actually grab a copy of DPaint, since I already have it for many other reasons, and I'll draw what my screen wants to look like, and I'll use the numbers in the coordinate tell me exactly the position on the screen to figure out what the gadget's going to look like. And I imagine, I get the feeling there's several people that do that. That is not as productive as Power Windows. Power Windows actually writes out your C data structures for you, so you don't have to type them in. I think that you're going to find some of the more hardcore programmers tend to shy away from it because you don't feel like you have enough control over what you're doing. But it tends to be a very good product for to get rid of a lot of the drudge work.
Okay. Well, one more question, Louis.
Does anybody know of any tools to let you use a Greenhill C compiler across development environment?
It used to exist. Isn't that not correct?
Yeah, that's what Commodore did their development on.
Mm-hmm. It started out in the early days that you could ask for it and maybe get it. Essentially, though, you need still. Well,
on which environment? On the Sun or
on a VAX?
On a VAX.
On a VAX. $68,000.
Yeah.
But it generates JRAM and relocatable for Greenhills does.
Do you know if that's possible to get that, Andy? Okay, can you get Greenhill's cross compiler to an Amiga on a VAX? Running Ultrix? Talk to Andy afterwards. There you go. Okay. Well, you apparently, if you're running Ultrix, one more question, and then we'll have to wrap up. Yeah.
Either the two, either you two think about bringing an interpreter.
A C interpreter.
That's
a marketing issue, and you can talk about that downstairs too.
Well, I mean, what I can say is, okay, there is PC Lint. I mean, people who did PC Lint, Gimple software, ported their PC Lint to the Amiga. We've been trying to convince them that they really ought to move CTERP over to the Amiga as well, and we have had some success, but I don't know exactly where that project stands.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for coming to our panel discussion. We hope everybody enjoyed it.